Hi, everyone, I'm Dan Abrams, and this is Court Candy.
Ready to take the play?
I'll kill all you. I hope you die first as well.
I'm not a predator. I'm not a threat to any community.
We kick things off in Kent County, Michigan, for the sentencing of Abigail Simon. 2 years earlier, the then 33-year-old tutor was allegedly having a sexual affair with a 15-year-old student. The student claimed the affair was consensual, but after the boy's mother found a racy photo of Simon on her son's phone, she went to authorities. But Simon was charged with 3 counts of criminal sexual conduct and 1 count of accosting a minor for immoral purposes. Simon had multiple opportunities to plead guilty and go to jail for as little as 5 months. But she chose a jury trial, and if found guilty, she could spend up to 25 years in prison. At trial, Simon's attorney tried to portray his client as the victim. She took the stand and attempted to convince the jury that the 15-year-old was really the aggressor.
Crazy and it's scary and it happened. He doesn't care because he's above the law, and he was told it doesn't matter. He was told it wasn't his fault. He was told he was never going to get in trouble. Like, I really don't get it.
Simon also claimed the student wasn't truthful when he testified against her.
He controlled me. He's still controlling this. I'm sitting here because you let him come up here and lie under oath. You let him come up here and say anything you wanted him to say.
After 3 weeks of testimony and reviewing hundreds of texts between tutor and student, the jury returned with a verdict.
Madam Foreperson, if you would kindly stand, if you could read down each count.
Sitting behind Simon, anxiously awaiting the verdict, is her family.
We, the jury, on count 1, on the charge of criminal sexual conduct, first degree, we, the jury, find the defendant, Abigail Simon, guilty.
Simon was found guilty on 3 of the 5 counts against her. 2 months later at sentencing, the victim's mother delivers a statement to the judge in the hope that Simon will get the maximum sentence.
Abby took total advantage of a boy, and she used him to please herself. It was hard to comprehend what Abby wanted to teach him to do to satisfy her perverse desires.
Mercy of the court.
I'm so sorry for all of this. I just want to go. I don't want to climb in my mom's bed. I'm not a predator, and I'm not a threat to any community. I'm lost and I'm broken, and I don't know how to go on without my family. I'm asking you to send me home as soon as possible.
The now 35-year-old schoolteacher sentenced to between 8 and 25 years in a state penitentiary. She'll be eligible for parole when she's 43. Next, we go to Dillon, South Carolina for the trial of Damian Inman. The 22-year-old was charged with murder, kidnapping, and armed robbery, among other charges, in the death of 75-year-old Mary Stutz. Inman and 2 accomplices, his brother Lorenzo, 18, and friend John Henry Bridges, 15, allegedly kidnapped Stutz from her home, then threw her in the trunk of her car and went for a joyride, all to allegedly impress a local gang. Stutz was shot twice and left on a dirt road. Inman was later seen driving the victim's car. He was arrested, tried, and convicted. The verdict, however, was overturned due to an error in jury selection. So Inman was tried a second time with the same result. Guilty on all charges. But as officers try to place him in cuffs, Inman punches a deputy. Then his sister jumps over a railing to try to help her brother. She was arrested for contempt of court. Then things got even uglier.
Oh my God!
Inman spits at Deputy Solicitor Kernard Redmond, as well as the Dillon County Sheriff. Inman's quickly removed, and the judge orders a recess. 15 minutes later, Inman returns, shackled, wearing a safety smock and spit shield. This time, there are no further disruptions, as Inman is sentenced to life in prison. Meanwhile, his two accomplices were also found guilty. His brother sentenced to life in prison, while Bridges received 40 years.
Look at me. Why am I not surprised?
Next, we're in San Diego, California, for the sentencing of John Gardner. The 31-year-old pled guilty to 2 counts of murder during the commission of rape of 2 teenage girls. Gardner abducted 14-year-old Amber Dubois as she walked us in a park. Neither victim's body was initially found. The physical evidence recovered near where King was abducted linked Gardner to the crime after his DNA came back as a match in the state's database of prior sexual offenders. The DNA evidence, however, was only enough to charge Gardner with King's murder, not Amber Dubois, which investigators suspected Gardner was also responsible for.
Why did you play guilty?
So in exchange for a guilty plea for both murders and for revealing the location of Dubois' body, prosecutors agreed not to pursue the death penalty. Now at sentencing, before the judge hands down his punishment, Gardner sits with his head slumped and eyes down as the victim's parents address him during their impact statements.
You've taken my daughter and my best friend. You have taken my youngest daughter's role model and her innocence. You have taken a bright, shining star from this community and our world away, and for what purpose? To serve your sick, twisted, perverted mind.
Now, with last hope for justice, we depend on the prison community to slowly and painfully cause your remaining days on this earth to be a living nightmare.
John, since I learned of your arrest for Chelsea's murder, I refuse to speak your name. I have called you monster, sociopath, serial killer, animal. You are all of those things. When I thought about what I was going to say today, I realized that names like monster and animal, in a perverse way, let you off the hook.
Chelsea King's mother then addresses the lasting impact Chelsea's murder has had on the victim's brother.
You've stolen from a magnificent 13-year-old boy, his magnificent sister, and his ever-present best friend, that he should be deprived of a future without his sister is cause enough for you to burn in hell. Look at me. Why am I not surprised?
Despite an angry mother's prompting, Gardner keeps his head down. Next to take the podium is Candace Moncayo, a would-be victim who fought off a rape attempt by Gardner in the very same park where Chelsea King was abducted just a month later. Moncayo claimed a hard elbow to Gardner's nose stunned him long enough for her to escape. Ultimately, it's Moncayo's last question that gets the biggest reaction from Gardner.
And finally, to ask him how his nose is.
She did it for publicity.
And moments later, Judge David Danielson issues 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders of Amber Dubois and Chelsea King. Next, we head to bond court in Broward County, Florida. Judge John Hurley presiding. The defendant is Fenton Ross, who's charged with possession of Flock, a synthetic drug. Hurley's about to release Ross on his own recognizance when the state objects and asks for a bond of $1,000. The reason? Ross is homeless and pretrial services will have a hard time keeping track of him. Ross is represented by public defender Dale Miller, who disagrees with the bond.
Judge, at this time I would object to the court putting the bond back. Being homeless should not be an impediment to being pretrial.
But Judge Hurley overrules and tries to move on. And that's when Miller speaks up.
Judge, since we're gonna warehouse Mr. Ross for a while.
Judge Hurley takes exception to Miller's choice of words.
Judge, since we're gonna warehouse Mr. Ross for a while, can we get a sample?
Hold on, sir. Hold on. You know what? Your unprofessionalism and your smart aleck, sir, don't even try. You need to pick up your professionalism. You're taking a shot at the court. It's unprofessional. It is really, sir, you do this quite often. The court's really tired of it. I've admonished you many times. And you know you're taking a shot by saying warehousing. You need to pick up your game for professionalism, sir. You don't need to editorialize. You don't need to give a shot like that to the court. I'm not inclined to hold you in contempt of court. That's not the way I do it. But let me just tell you, you need to pick your game up because your shots to this court really undermine everyone's view of how the court should be run. And you need to stop doing this. And I'm going to ask you to please, sir, take a pause today and think about this and knock it off. Thank you.
Judge?
But Miller decides not to back down and continues arguing.
Judge?
I don't know nothing more about that.
I am advocating zealously for my client.
You're advocating in an unprofessional way, and I'm not going to hear another word about it.
After the hearing, Judge Hurley perhaps had a change of heart, because the he's eventually released and ordered to pay a fine of $293. Next, we go to Memphis, Tennessee, for the verdict in the case against Shelby Isaac. The 19-year-old's accused of first-degree murder in the death of Eddie Tate and his girlfriend Edwina Thomas, who was 8 weeks pregnant at the time. The alleged motive? A bad hair week. Nearly 2 years earlier, Isaac bought $250 worth of hair extensions from Tate. Apparently upset with the purchase, Isaac scheduled a second meeting to get her money back. And according to testimony of a witness who claimed to be there at the time, that's when she allegedly shot and killed the victims. But the defense pointed to the lack of physical evidence in the case.
When you follow the credible and unbiased evidence in this case, it does not lead you to Shelby Isaac.
After hearing all the evidence, the jury returned with a verdict.
Has the jury arrived at a verdict in this case? All 4 counts? Were they unanimous?
If Isaac is found guilty, she could spend the rest of her life in prison.
Ms. Isaac, please stand.
Judge James Lammy reads the verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder as included in count 1. Signed by the foreperson of the jury. Ms. Aldridge, is that your verdict? Ms. Foster, is that your verdict?
Yes.
Of second-degree murder as included in count 1. Signed by the foreperson of the jury.
Upon hearing the news, Isaac collapses to the floor. Meanwhile, the judge doesn't skip a beat as he individually polls the jurors and moves on to the next count.
Sir, is that your verdict? Ma'am, is that your verdict? Ma'am, is that your verdict? And
as the court staff tends to Isaac, who remains on the floor, the judge continues to carry on with the business at hand.
Take your verdict, sir. Take your verdict, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. As to count 2 of the indictment, we find the man guilty of second-degree murder. Sir, is that your verdict? Your verdict, ma'am?
Yes.
Your verdict, ma'am?
Yes.
Your verdict? Your verdict? Your verdict? Your verdict, sir? Your verdict? Your verdict? Your verdict? As to count 3, that was count 4, I'm sorry. In count 4, the criminally negligent homicide is included in count 4. So is that your verdict, ma'am?
After a few minutes, as the judge continues, Isaac lets out a scream and pleads for help.
Your verdict?
Isaac is convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder, reckless homicide, and criminally negligent homicide of the unborn baby. She's sentenced to 30 years in a state penitentiary and and won't be eligible for release until the year 2040, when she'll be 42 years old.
We know exactly why my family is dead. We know who did it.
Next, we go to Tampa, Florida, the sentencing of Cameron Herron. He's pled guilty to 2 charges of vehicular manslaughter. 3 years earlier, Herron, who was 18 at the time, was racing another teen, John Baranow, when he crashed his car into 25-year-old Jessica Rabinault, who was out walking with her 21-month-old baby, Lilia. Rabinault died at the scene, while baby Lilia died the next day at the hospital. This was not Herron's first time street racing, and according to the computer system in his vehicle, on the day of the crash, he was driving 102 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone. Baranow, who was racing Herron at the time of the accident, made a deal with the state. He pled guilty to 2 vehicular homicide charges and received a sentence of 6 years in prison, plus 15 years probation. Before Herron, who pled guilty to the same charges, learns if he'll get a similar sentence, witnesses take the stand to testify about the defendant's character.
Cameron has continued to show extreme remorse. He doesn't eat, he doesn't sleep, and I know he's going to spend the rest of his life carrying this memory.
The defendant then asked his attorney, John Fitzgibbons, to read a statement on his behalf.
I would like to apologize to the family that lost 2 beautiful souls. I know that nothing can be done to turn back the clock, but I will and would do anything in my power to fix it.
Next, it's the victim's family members who deliver statements, most notably David Rabinault, who lost both his wife and baby daughter.
It is critical for you to understand that you've created everlasting pain and depths of sorrow. Because of your existence, 2 beautiful, innocent lives were denied a full life. We know exactly why my family is dead. We know who did it, and we are still... The truth behind this is that you are privileged. You killed a mother and a daughter. You did.
Finally, Rabinault speaks directly to the judge, Christopher Nash.
Your Honor, I hate to beg, but I beg you for the ultimate sentence, which is 30 years in prison. 15 years for each count.
After listening to the powerful impact statements from families of both the defendant and the victims, the judge must make his ruling.
There's really nothing that the court can do that's capable of fixing the harm that has been caused to the victims in this case. So I'm bound by the law, and that'll run consecutive to count 1 for a total of 24 years Florida State Prison.
Herron is sentenced to a total of 24 years in prison. As the length of his sentence sinks in, bailiffs remove Herron from the court. Herron has appealed the sentence, but if the terms remain, he won't be released from prison until the year 2045, and he'll be 45 years old. That's it for this edition of Court Cam. I'm Dan Abrams. Thanks for watching.